Some individuals aren't invited to the table for what they bring, but for how they appear. That's how Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene began her remarks at the Congressional Diversity Policy Forum. She didn't name names, but her brief glance at Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett left no doubts, and everyone in attendance felt it. Jasmine, seated just beside her, didn't flinch. She didn't sigh, didn't fidget, didn't offer any visible reaction. She simply closed her right hand beneath the table and remained still. A few in the room let out faint chuckles, the kind you hear when people try to stay close to power. Marjorie continued, "We've manufactured a generation of perfectly diverse, perfectly directionless figureheads." Polite applause followed, at tea. That moment, one of the cameras scanning the crowd landed briefly on an older black woman in the back row. Her silver hair was tucked under a worn gray coat. She sat quietly, back straight, hands folded, eyes fixed on the stage. No one knew who she was, yet. Not until she rose, walked silently to the stage, laid down an old photograph, and departed, just as quietly. Still without saying a single word. Where are you watching this from? Drop your city, state, or country in the comments. We love knowing where these stories land. And if you believe voices don't always need permission to be heard, hit subscribe to help us keep these moments alive. The event, titled Diversity in Congress, From Token to Transformation, took place in the Federal Strategy Center, a sleek, glass-paneled auditorium that had recently become a symbol of new legislative energy. The forum promised to be an honest dialogue between contrasting political visions across generations. Representative Greene, well known for her staunch far-right views, arrived with a media entourage, her steps trailed by both CNN and Fox News. Jasmine Crockett walked in alone. No press, no lights. Even the stage lighting seemed to favor Greene. Whether by accident or intention, it was impossible to tell. The moderator opened gently with Greene. As a vocal critic of diversity mandates, what do you believe still holds us back from moving? Beyond race-based policies, Greene smiled. Maybe the problem is, what we call diversity often means appearances over actual ability. The crowd laughed, a few clapped. Jasmine remained composed. Turning to her, the moderator asked, "Congresswoman Crockett, you've been widely referred to as a diversity success story. Does that label ever feel limiting?" The words were neutral, but the implication stung. Were you picked for your merit or for optics? Jasmine nodded slowly. "I'm not ashamed that people see I'm black or a woman. I'm only sorry when those truths are used to erase everything else I am." No one clapped. But in the back row, the silver-haired woman gently tilted her head, almost like a nod. No one introduced her. No badge, no fanfare. That was Jasmine's grandmother, a woman once forbidden from attending school because of her skin. She used to stand outside windows, listening to lessons she was never allowed to join. While Greene was asked about policy frameworks and data-driven governance, Jasmine fielded questions about identity and personal experience, softly framing her as a symbol, not a strategist. Greene sensed the imbalance. "I don't blame Miss Jasmine," she added, "but when we make suffering sacred, we forget to ask who's truly qualified." Applause followed. Still, Jasmine didn't respond. Her eyes didn't flash. But something behind them changed. A look of someone long used to their achievements being minimized, not by insult, but by implication. Across the room, her grandmother lowered her gaze for a moment, perhaps remembering the day a teacher once told her, "There's no point in teaching a black girl to read." Greene went on. "Some people aren't selected for responsibility. They're selected because they fit a narrative. That's not equity. That's politics." The hall split. Her supporters nodded and clapped. Others remained silent, glancing toward Jasmine. Waiting. Jasmine stared down at her notebook. The pen rested across the page, untouched. Greene leaned slightly toward her, lowered her voice just enough to be overheard. "When you're raised in the shadow of history, it can make you think that's a pass to the front. A soft murmur rolled through the audience, half gasp, half disbelief. Jasmine didn't flinch, but her grandmother's gaze sharpened from the back. A student stood midway through the room, young, white, in a neutral-toned blazer and a conservative student pin. She addressed Jasmine. Sometimes people aren't being prejudiced when they talk about your background. They're just being honest. Not everything is an attack. No eruption followed, just a strange pause. Then Jasmine looked up, for the first time, directly at the student. Have you ever written a college essay for a school your grandparents couldn't attend? Her voice didn't rise. The student blinked. No reply. My grandmother listened to lessons through closed windows. She didn't call it injustice. She called it life. But when I say it aloud, it's suddenly too emotional. Jasmine paused. Sharing memory isn't asking for favors. It's honoring a vow to those who weren't allowed to speak. The student sat back down. Silent. No applause. Just stillness. Then Greene returned to the mic. We can't legislate with feelings. Data drives policy, not photographs and old family stories. It was a cold statement. Too cold. Even some who had clapped before stayed quiet. A soft scrape came from the back. The old woman shifted, didn't rise, just tilted her head, as if listening harder now. Jasmine remained still. Then quietly, she opened her notebook, wrote a single line. The camera captured her hand. Slightly trembling, then she closed it. The moderator tried to steer the conversation elsewhere, but the room had shifted. No one followed. Words had stopped mattering in the same way. Then finally, her grandmother stood, not with fanfare. No dramatic entrance, just the quiet certainty of someone who had waited a lifetime for the right moment. No one introduced her. No mic was passed. She walked step by step toward the stage, as if retracing steps she'd imagined since girlhood. The light caught her silver hair just right. No one stopped her. She said nothing, and Jasmine looked up at her, truly looked, maybe for the first time that entire night. Her eyes shimmered, but no tears fell. Jasmine's grandmother stepped to the center of the speaker's table. She didn't touch the microphone, didn't acknowledge the crowd, didn't glance at Jasmine. From her coat pocket, she pulled out an aged photograph, its edges curled, its color browned by time. She placed it directly in front of Jasmine without a word. The camera panned slowly. In the image, a young black girl, no more than 6, sitting on the kitchen floor, holding a book nearly as big as she was. Her gaze was fixed on the pages, oblivious to the world around her. Jasmine didn't touch the photo. She stared at it, lips pressed shut, her hands unmoved since the moment her grandmother rose. The elderly woman turned and walked away. No backward glance, no farewell, just that slender frame exiting like a soft breeze. The room held its breath. A student in the second row stifled a gasp. Someone beside her passed a tissue. A crew member behind the curtain blinked away tears, headset still on. Marjorie Greene sat frozen, her eyes unfocused, her fingers twitching in a defensive search for control that no longer existed. The moderator opened his mouth to speak, then hesitated. Jasmine gently placed her hand on the photo, not lifting it, just touching it, like brushing off dust from a memory. Her expression had changed, no longer the guarded look of someone enduring a battle. Now it was the calm of someone who had walked through it, still standing, still here. She said nothing, but no one needed her to. Everyone in that room had just witnessed an answer, not one made of words or rebuttals, but a presence, a living reminder. A chapter of history no longer silent. An older professor in the back placed a hand over his heart. A cameraman lowered his lens, as if realizing some truths can't be captured through editing. There was no applause, no standing ovation, just stillness, the kind that settles when something sacred has happened. Jasmine's grandmother hadn't made a speech. But she had spoken all the same, and the room heard it. A man stood from the center rows, mid-50s, silver at the temples, blazer pin identifying him as a former advisor to Greene's first campaign. "I wrote her first speech," he said, voice calm. "Back when she hadn't yet been elected. I used to think pride came from saying what others were afraid to." He paused. "But when that woman walked to the front, I didn't see a political stunt. I saw something I'd forgotten I ever needed." Marjorie looked up for the first time since the silence began. "My mother passed when I was 15, he continued. "It was my grandmother who taught me how to walk into rooms without shrinking." He exhaled. "But then I got older and I forgot her lessons. I thought I had outgrown them." He turned toward Jasmine. "I'm sorry. If I ever helped paint you as something you're not. Today I remembered. Some stories don't get left behind. They wait until we're ready to listen." Jasmine nodded once. Still, she said nothing. Marjorie leaned toward her mic, but the moderator briefly cut her audio. A small pause, a subtle shift in power. A young woman in the third row raised her hand. "My dad's Puerto Rican, my mom's white. I grew up feeling split between two worlds, but today I feel whole. I feel like I have a responsibility now to carry this forward, not with speeches, but by not forgetting." Still, no one clapped, but everyone listened. In the sixth row, a student opened Twitter. He typed, "Little girl reading in kitchen, Crockett's grandmother." The top tweet was already spreading, a screenshot of the moment the old woman placed the photo on the table. The caption read, "She wasn't on the agenda, but the room changed when she stood." Within an hour, a hashtag began trending. She stood for us. Not from a press release, not from a viral campaign. Just from one student who couldn't unsee what he saw. One tweet read, "My grandma was expelled from school for being a teen mom. I'm going to show her this video even if she can't speak anymore." Another said, "I don't know politics, but I know this. When an elder rises and no one interrupts, something sacred is happening." Even conservative accounts shared the clip. Maybe this time silence is what we need to learn from. That's when things truly shifted. Not from confrontation, not from cancellation, but from memory, from dignity, from someone once invisible stepping forward and then walking away at exactly the right time. No one booed Greene, no one shouted her down, but the way people looked at her had changed. Some turned their eyes toward Jasmine. Some looked to the aisle where the elder had walked away, and others simply closed their laptops. Because the most important moment had already happened. That night, a student quietly posted the video. No text, just the moment her hand let go of the photo. By morning, it had 2.7 million views. In a Chicago community library, students printed the image and hung it in the reading room. Underneath, a line in simple font. "Those denied the chance to learn once raised those brave enough to speak." No names, just the truth. In Los Angeles, students asked their school to create a day of the forgotten. They brought stories about grandmothers, aunts, teachers, people once silenced. "My grandmother was denied a job because she couldn't type. She taught herself, then taught my mom. My mom now teaches coding. My aunt was suspended for refusing to straighten her hair. I wish I could hand her a mic, even if just in my dreams." Within 72 hours, the hashtag, "and she did not speak, but we heard," climbed into the top 5 in the country. There was no backlash, no outrage, just remembrance. A museum in New York placed the photo at its entrance. No headline, just Jasmine's quiet quote. "She didn't come to silence anyone. She came so I wouldn't have to stand alone." A week later, Greene made a brief post. "I still believe in merit. But I now know silence isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's the most powerful truth of all." Jasmine posted nothing until a student emailed asking for the photo to hang on a classroom door. For a friend recently suspended after speaking out, Jasmine's reply? Just a link to the original image. No caption. At Stanford, a media professor projected the photo. "What makes an image unforgettable?" he asked. A student answered, "When it doesn't need a headline and still makes you pause. An Asian American." Reporter wrote, "My mom used to say, you don't need to speak, just know when to stand. I never understood. Until now." That image, quiet, grainy, untouched, became one of the most shared of the month. Not because it sparked outrage, but because it reminded people of someone who once stood silently behind them. In Atlanta, a woman played the video for her mother, now unable to speak. Her mother cried. She, too, had been denied the right to learn. At a Texas school, a young black girl told her teacher, "She didn't talk, but I think she said something anyway, and that was enough." The story didn't end with headlines. It ended in libraries, hallways, bulletin boards. A photo of an older woman placing a picture on a table, then turning away. No logo, no slogan, just a quiet line. Not everyone denied education was unworthy. Some were simply born too early. Jasmine never took interviews, but a clip emerged, her walking quietly beside her grandmother through a garden. No sound, just one line of text. She didn't need an invitation. She just needed to know her granddaughter was still listening. And from that moment, a quiet question echoed in many hearts. Who once stood silently behind you? If someone comes to mind, a teacher, a parent, a grandparent, drop their name in the comments, or write a line like, "She stood for me. Now I'll speak for her." I got to learn because they couldn't. I'm still walking because someone once kept the door open. Not for likes, but for remembrance, because not all voices need to be loud, some just need to be heard at the right moment.